The nice thing is that you can set up this page without writing any code. I mean,
Absolutely.
like literally zero.
Yeah. It's like Mike level easy to do.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've actually seen Mike do this, so it's.
Welcome everybody. Today, October 5th. Our topic is creating a policy center in SharePoint, and we have policies in brackets here because a lot of what we'll talk about today can be applied to other kinds of content, but we're going to start with policies because it's a nice tangible example of what we're doing. For those of you who don't know the team, oh, I lost my sharing.
There's the team, though.
Here we are.
Let's try that again. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, wasn't normally how we do that, but I'm
yeah, no kidding. That was pretty sweet. Let's go for a live look at the team right now. So here we are missing Emily today, but we'll fill in for her as ably as we can. Here's what we wanted to talk through. What is it? Why create one? Some of the IA considerations around creating a policy center, or really any content-centric center. We'll talk about that. How to build it and how to automate it to get to reliability here. So, Mark, you want to talk about the what is it and why?
Sure. And I was the one who put policy in brackets. I mean, we tend to build a policy center for a lot of clients because policies are a thing that are managed by multiple departments. And so it's a good sort of content example to talk this through, but it really can be lots of other things. But the goal is to do what we think of as distributed content management. We want to let each department or each work group or each, you name it, but in this case, let's talk about departments, manage the policies that they own. So rather than having one site or one document library where everyone has to sort of get their stuff into to make it available in a unified way, we create the information architecture so that people can upload policies in their department site based on whatever process they have to get from, here's an idea for a policy to the end result. And we can show a unified view of all of those policies wherever they may sit. The view that we give, that policy center, is a search-driven view. So we use the PNP Modern Search web parts, which are shown in that screenshot. And we can tune it to have whatever filters make sense based on how your organization or our client's organization think about what a policy is. And then we have a search box. So we're doing better than, people say, can't you just make search work like Google? Sure. And that's sort of what you have at the top of the screen, that Microsoft search box, which is generally better than Google, even there. But I think what we're doing down below is we're coming up with a search-driven experience that is customized based on the content we're actually working with. We know what you're going to look for. We know why you're going to look for it. We know how it's structured, so we can make search work far better than just sort of a generic search.
Mark, one thing when you mention distributed content management, I think we have this conversation with a lot of clients and talking about and planning and designing intranets where the governance and information management tends to follow group, team, departmental, functional lines, but the user experiences we want to build for people, I don't care what department owns the COVID-19 policy. I just want to know how to comply with the COVID-19 policy. So that you can have both, right? You can have the good governance on the back end, but create these user-centric experiences on the front end this way.
Yeah, I think, so sort of the old-fashioned way of doing this is each department may have their policies and you have to know who owns it. Like, gee, this one seems sort of like a finance thing. Let me go look in the finance site and see if I can find it there. Or we build one giant library and we put everything there. And then we have to have the governance to, either
parse
somebody owns that library. Yeah, and then we end up with weird permissions by folder. Or, what we find in building, especially intranets these days, is we try to keep the permissions as much as possible at the top level of every site. We try not to break permissions a lot of places. When there's a reason to, an exception that actually makes sense, we do it. but we want the site owners for each department to be able to just upload their policies because they own the site, they have that responsibility, we trust them.
So Mark, I think we touched on some of the whys around that content management process and the
Yep.
user experiences, being able to bifurcate that a little bit. What else?
The nice thing about doing this in an organized way, not just creating a document library in each site that is called policies and not have any specialness to it. If you just uploaded those documents, they would just be they would have content type document. So we wouldn't actually know how to roll them up very easily. By creating a content type in the content type hub or content type gallery at the tenant level, depending on how you think of the UI, you have a reusable content type that you're centrally managing. And that way, if you decide, you know what, for every content type, we want to start tracking the expiration date, which is a very common piece of metadata for a policy, then you can add that to the content type and publish it, and it magically shows up in all of those document libraries where you're storing policies. Of course, you still have to get people to fill in the date, but you're managing that information architecture centrally, as opposed to managing the content centrally, which can be pretty powerful. And then we've already touched on the fact that this is we're talking about policy centers. You could use these same steps to build a sort of central rolled up view of stuff, like what we do with news or events in an intranet too, using Microsoft's built-in tools.
And Mark, I think in the edit to this, we struck out document and put in content in the second bullet to reflect that this could be done for any content type, not just documents, right?
Yeah. So list-based video, sure. Yeah, any place where you're building a good enough information architecture that you can say, show me all of these.
Yep.
Sorry,
go ahead, Julie.
No, Krista has a question. If multiple departments are policy owners, would you just upload a copy to one of their sites to display in the policy center? I assume internal governance to determine and manage that.
Yeah, and usually what we recommend is, let's say the HR team has their own team, right? Microsoft team. So they have a private place where they do their work. Only HR people go in there. So when they say, well, we need a policy on, paid time off, let's write one of those. That process happens in their team or team site. That is sort of outside the policy center or the intranet domain. So they go through whatever process they need to go through. Some departments have really strict processes for approval and sign-offs, and they have to get lawyers to look at things or whatever. Other policies, like here's the policy for taking out the stuff in the refrigerator on Fridays, nobody really needs to review that. So the facilities people can just post it. So we sort of take the complexity of the process off the intranet table. We don't put anything in the intranet until it's actually fully baked, to continue the weird metaphors. So the HR people finish their policy about paid time off, and then they do, just very simply, unless you build something more complicated, do a copy to on that document into the policies library in their HR intranet site, which is usually a communication site. So the process again is sort of off intranet, sort of managed by the people who own that policy, and then the final result is published to the document library in the department. Did I answer your question, Krista? Sorry, may have lost the thread.
No, it's sort of, yeah. I mean, I was thinking if, say, HR and finance are co-owners of a policy, and if the file needs to live on communication site, absolutely. Would it be on just HRs or just finances in order to show up in the policy center?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about implementing something like this. You often get into a lot of discussions. I have a client right now where I'm doing this. Who really owns this policy? You know, we've had this policy out there for years, but nobody really owns it. No one's ever updated it. Well, in doing this, you end up sort of sorting that out. And one of those two departments is probably the primary owner. And if they need to work together to make sure that that policy is in good shape, that's up to them to do. But yes, it should be in exactly one place.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Mark.
Another little side chat that's been going on is Derek and I have been addressing someone asking about, does this work with multi-geo? And essentially the quick answer, more in the chat, is that you have to have configured search to be multi-geo in order for that to work correctly. Mike, you stopped sharing slides, just so you know.
I did. Stand by. Coming
Here,
back.
meet the team again.
Why would you do that?
Now
Is
you've
it be-
really thrown everything off.
Is it because my light went off and that threw the whole?
Coming right back. I was busy daring Todd to do something. All right. Here we
I
go.
was being so quiet too. If you'd.
So this is our just a screenshot from our we have some praxis design tenant that we use for art of the possible discussions and things like that. So in that tenant, we have hub site navigation that represents typical navigation you might have for an intranet. And one of the resources that we have there is the policy center. So I don't have to, like I said before, I don't have to think about, you know, is this an HR policy? Would finance own this? I can just say, I'm going to the policy center because I know that there's a policy about this, or at least I think there might be. And so I'm going to go and look for it there.
Let's talk about how to go about it, the how-to piece.
Do you want me to just keep going? I know, Derek, you have a lots to say here, but.
I mean, I can definitely talk to this part. So it all really boils down at the beginning is setting up your information architecture properly. So we want to make sure that we create a policy content type, and do that in the content type gallery, because that can get propagated out to n number of sites, and that's really the key there. So you're not recreating or duplicating efforts. Obviously, create your site columns that'll give you, good metadata there. So title, effective date, things like that, summaries. And then you can create a policy library in each site where you need it. Now, once you connect the content type to that, you'll be able to create new policies in that site. And one thing, before you move forward, you've got to have at least one library with one piece of document, with one document in it, or one page, whatever it is, with all the metadata filled out for that particular thing. And the reason for that is that you don't get all the crawled properties if there's no content in one of the properties. So you've got to at least have one bit of content in everything first.
When you create that policies library and you enable the policy content type, especially if you use the modern UI, then what you've essentially done is you've added policy as the second content type that's available in that library. The first one still is document. And what you want to do is go into the old classic library settings UI and delete that document content type from that list, using the scariest link in all of SharePoint, which says delete this content type. Because if you upload something into that library and it becomes document instead of policy, then none of this works. You won't have those metadata fields to fill in. You won't ever see them crawled, et cetera, et cetera.
All right, so this is kind of the back end. Let's talk about the front end a bit.
All right, so then once you sort of get all the data and everything gets crawled, you do need, if there's things you want to use for filters, you do need to make sure that you create managed properties to those site columns. We use the refinable string for things like site name. In the example that Mark showed previously, it was pulling out, HR and finance. Those are the site names. And so you've got the data in the site name property, map it to a managed property in the refinable strings, and then you can pull that forward as both a filter and something that you display on the screen. The other thing that I like to do as a better practice is I always create a result source which helps filter down that query. So essentially you're creating a pre-filtered index of just all the policies. And then you can search against those policies and set up the P&P search web part to just hit that result source.
So
yeah.
So Derek, so I think just to clarify a few things, one thing, to do all this setup that's talked about on this page, you have to be not necessarily a SharePoint admin, but the SharePoint admin has had to give you access to go into search settings to do this search setup. So this is not something that you can just, any user can willy-nilly configure. And then the second thing that I was going to point out is that forgot. I totally just forgot my second point. So, okay, whatever.
It's an important one, though.
It was so important. I don't remember.
We can come back to it. So Derek, the benefits of the result source, I think, have a lot to do with page load performance, correct? A quicker.
Yep, yeah, exactly. It will make the search query that gets run come back faster. If you imagine you've got 10 million results in your index, and you're searching against all 10 million of those results, that's going to take significantly longer than if you filter that down beforehand to just filter against the 50 or so policies you've got.
I know what it was. The result source is meant to be set to content type. Content type equals this, and that's the result source. Yeah.
I missed that part, Julie. Thank you.
That's okay. Yeah. I knew something wasn't clear, and then I forgot what it was. There we go.
Yeah, yeah. The when you configure it, you set it to the content type ID or content type name starts with, and then you use the ID.
Paste the GUID in there.
Yep. Absolutely.
And it's GUID, usually GUID star, because if you inherit from policy, or policy is the GUIDs get bigger and bigger as you use them. So you want to make sure that it's anything that starts with it.
Has to be GUID star, or else it doesn't work. Yeah. So,
and one other comment on this slide. You see that refinable string 00 is set to OWS. The crawled property map to it is OWS _ site name. When I start working in a new tenant, I almost always do that mapping before we even talk about doing a policy center, because using the site name as a filter in an intranet especially is just a really useful filter. And then I always remember that it's a refinable string 00. In the cases where some mappings have already happened, then I've got to remember it's, refinable string 07 or something. And so it's always nice to just have it at 00.
All right, let's talk about that page a little bit. Some of the nuances of setting this up. I think you got some builds on here, Derek.
Yeah, so this is as we've been talking about, this is using the P&P modern search web part. There are a bunch of different components to it, but the three that we use for this particular solution is the search box, obviously, and this collects the input. Keep going. And then we've got the search results. This is set to configure directly against that result source. And then this one, there's a whole bunch of different layouts. We've done a session on the modern search web part before, but you can actually configure, sort of document cards. You can use a list model like this. You can customize the data that gets shown here. So depending on what content you have in that content type, you could pull in site name, or you could pull in this summary, or you could pull in last modified date, or effective date, and so that you can start to create ways to filter and slice and dice this content visually for your users. There's also an update with P&P 4, the search results version 4, where you can include adaptive cards and create custom layouts for this particular content, so that you're not just limited to the 3 or 4 items here.
If you're pretty savvy too, you can put your own CSS and use a handlebars template to make your own custom layouts, which I've done by actually copying card layouts done in the H2O library, the H2O core library, copying that CSS as well, pasting it into the handlebars template page, and then wiring.
See, now the two devs are trying to make this so pretty and complicated and for very good reasons.
I had a
The-
client who asked
no,
for a very
absolute-
specific layout. So
Absolutely agree.
saying it can be done.
And we often go there. The nice thing is that you can set up this page without writing any code. I mean,
Absolutely.
like literally zero.
It's like
which-
Mike level easy to do.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've actually seen Mike do this, so it's you know.
but it's really
But you're right, Julie. You're right. And
but it's really
especially
nice you
when-
can go all the way from Mike level to Julie level,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
it's a product for all of us. Honestly, it's the
And-
only
and-
product that's all for all of us.
Yeah. It's great because, you know, if you might have a center that brings in, I don't know, like contracts, and maybe you have 5 different kinds of contracts. You've got vendor contracts and employee contracts, and why you would show that to everybody, I can't tell you. But you might display each different type of content in a different way in that search results web part,
Yeah.
using some of the tricks that Julie and Derek are talking about.
Yeah. But it really is a maturity model there, like
Yeah.
what you can do in the user interface, and what you can configure, and what you can pull, you know, where you can pull data and customize things is one thing. Going all the way up to the custom adaptive card or custom handlebars template, you have to be really comfortable with those technologies. I mean, I do this a lot for our clients and build custom solutions using custom layouts. And it's not for the faint of heart if you don't understand that technology. So, you know, I love it.
I think that actually the harder part of the maturity sort of aspect of building a something center like this is actually getting people to get their heads around just the fact that you can do it, and you have the distributed content management and stuff. The techie, and I'm not saying that in a bad way at all. The sort
Sure you're
of
not.
technical improvements as you march up the technical side of the maturity model are things that you may get to later, and that's totally fine. You know, if you start
Yep.
simple just to get people to understand what it is you're talking about, then you can get a lot of traction that way.
And maybe we should do a session specifically on customizing the UI for this for the
Yeah.
PHP search web part, because
That would
that's
be cool.
you can go 0 to 100 on that.
Yeah.
Just in instance of time though, we've also got the search filters web part, and so this one will only accept the managed properties that you can that have been crawled, and then you can use these as filters to refine the results inside the search results. Mark, is
Those
there
are all
anything else you-
collapsed. Those are all
Yeah.
collapsed, but because you've created that policies library in the department sites where there actually are policies, you don't have to create them in every place, then you would see the list of departments that actually have policies. So you don't see filters unless there's actual content that goes with that value. So if finance hasn't uploaded a policy yet, you don't see finance there. So you can't end up in dead ends.
So once this is in place, I think we talked about some ways to automate this and make this process even a bit better. So let's talk about that if we could.
Well, I mean, some of the things that Julie and Derek were just talking about are, not automation opportunities necessarily, but
Enhancement, for
You're
sure.
you're getting a clue that you can go a lot further with this.
Yeah.
One of the things that we usually will do is we'll create a site template to instantiate that policies library. It's really easy to set one up. You create a library called policies, you enable the policy content type, you delete the document content type, and you're up and running. But if you don't want people to have to think about those 3 simple steps, which is totally fine, and we do this all the time, you just create a site template. And it's interesting because I find I use site templates as building blocks as opposed to as site templates. They're not most of the stuff I do is not, let's create a full-blown site with all kinds of stuff in it, though I do that. It's, in this case, I have a site template called add policies library. That's all it does. It leaves everything else alone. So it's really just you can run that site template on any site, when you create it, or later, or again, and it just does that one thing. The nice thing about building the prototypical site. So typically we'll build like the HR site first. We put the policies library in there. We set the policy content type. We can use that get PNP site script commandlet. Todd, I should let you talk about this, to export that definition and then just tweak it a little bit and then turn that into the commandlet is add PNP site design. These things used to be called site designs, and then Microsoft, in its infinite wisdom, as it always does, renamed site designs to site template. So we then have a site template. So this is a relatively simple thing to do with PowerShell. It's a handful of commands. You've got to edit a little bit of JSON, but it's an automation opportunity. And you could see building, little site template chunks to instantiate different kinds of libraries or different sets of libraries that you might want to bolt on to existing sites. Did I get it right, Todd?
Yes, and the slide did have a PowerShell typo in it that we caught in the practice session. So everybody was spared any incorrect PowerShell.
Well, I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry I put you through that.
I did it. I was cleaning up a line break, and I lost a hyphen in there, and Todd immediately found the problem.
Ooh, thank God we have Todd.
It's a good thing I was here. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes we put those things in just so Todd has, something to call out. It's like giving a lawyer an agreement. Make sure there's one mistake in it.
Guys,
yes.
Krista just wants to clarify. The policy center is a separate communication site in your tenant. Is that correct? And I believe that is.
No, we usually, well, you could certainly create a separate site, and you would do that if you wanted to manage the permissions in some kind of weird way. That's really the only reason I would think that you would do that. Usually we just build a page in the root site of the intranet, though that page could be in any department too, because all you're doing is you're adding those PNP modern search web parts, and you're setting some filters, you're configuring that page. But generally it makes the most sense for that page to be in the root site, the home site of your intranet. When we get to the point where we have multiple home sites or whatever, as things change in complexity, you might rethink that. But it's that simple. Just new page in the home site, set it up with the web parts, and you're all set to go. Site Legos. Yeah, that would be cool. Except that what would happen? They would name it Site Legos, Mike, and then they'd get sued. And they'd have to name it something else, so they would call it Site
Blocks.
One site, one Lego,
one block.
Yeah.
power block.
Sky Lego. That's right, Mike. Exactly. Power block.
Lego.
No, Viva.
Lego. That's how they get around
Viva
it.
block.
Viva
Come
block.
on, Viva blocks.
Why not? Everything's got to be Viva these days.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to Microsoft hell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll be put in Microsoft detention. Let's talk about some resources that we put together. We did do that. I'm glad we put that link in for the how to site columns become managed properties. I refer back to that every time. If it's a thing you do once every 6 months, that's a really good resource because you never remember all the steps, and not everybody has a mark on their IM to guide them through it.
The site columns, managed properties, crawl properties, and how to configure that stuff in KQL, which stands for K query language. I don't know what K stands for. Knowledge? I honestly have no idea. You can be really good with that and still only have like a bachelor's degree. I mean, I ran into something a couple of weeks ago, and I started talking to Michael Svensson about it, who I consider one of the smartest people about search on the planet. And we found some stuff he'd never. Yeah, he is, not me. And we found some stuff that he'd never seen before. So it's a complex place, but you can get to the bachelor degree sort of level without too much trouble. And that article does help you get there. And that's actually in the Microsoft 365 community docs, which is a repo I'm an admin for. So is Emily. So if you have any suggestions about that article, or if you think that process isn't spelled out well in that article and you think we need other ones, please let us know and we'll get on it.
So if
Speaking
AC
of-
wants to go in there and make sure that KQL is shown as keyword query language, he could do that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andrew.
So
Yes.
quick plug. If you are in Boston and planning to come to Collab Days, Emily has a session on centralizing content in a decentralized world. So that is specifically not necessarily this particular example, but a like scenario using the PNP search rollup, as well as different options along that maturity model from from what you can do with decentralized content, without decentralized content, etc.
I know we're at the top of the hour. Thank you, Derek. Great plug. Next time we get together will be post Ignite, and we're excited to talk about the book of news and all the things that Microsoft has been sitting on that will be announced at Ignite. If you haven't signed up for Ignite, it's October 12th through 14th. The days are counting down also to Collab Days New England. If you're going to be in town, link to participate
Get your friends
in that.
to sign up. Get
Yep.
it done. We're
Yep.
running out of time. If you want
And for-
food, get
And for
yourself
those more
signed
dev
up.
centric, folks,
Julie will not feed you if you don't register.
I will not feed you.
It will not happen.
and for
Sorry,
the devs in the crowd, as always, the Cloud Dev Clarity podcast with Julie and Andrew Connell, very highly recommended for those of you with dev proclivities around Microsoft 365. Anything else? Or
I had
are we
a
going to convene for 2 weeks?
dev proclivity, but I saw a doctor about it.
Okay, get some medicine, it clears right up. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh boy,
HR,
on fire today.
HR.
Yeah, HR.
Yeah.
Check the policy.
And on
Sure.
that note, bye.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Appreciate it. We'll speak to you in 2 weeks.
See y'all. Bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you so much for joining us this week on Ask and Praxis. We love getting your questions or session ideas. You can submit by using the link in About. If you find this helpful, hit that like or subscribe button and share this content with your colleagues. Join us again as we release new content every other Wednesday.